Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to today's LinkedIn Live 2024 Cross-Border Key Takeaways and Future Trends. My name is Brian Blaylock. I'm the Director of Client Development here at Blue Grace Logistics, and I'm very excited to have three very special guests with us here today. And I'm going to just briefly introduce them. But guys, if you don't mind, I would like you to just tell them a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about your time in the industry. And I'm going to start with you, Mark Ford, who is our Chief Capacity Officer. Mark?
Yeah, good afternoon, audience. Thanks for having me, Brian. My name is Mark Ford. I'm the Chief Capacity Officer at Blue Grace. I've been in the industry for about a little over 28 years, mostly on the carrier procurement side. And then within BG specifically, we have two separate sales channels, and carrier sales is a shared service amongst those. And so I manage that team, and then the front-end development for our internal tech applications that we build in-house, and any integrations that we have with any external platforms.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And our next guest is Jose Fernandez. Jose is our Vice President and Country Manager for Mexico. So very on topic today, Jose. I'm very glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Brian. And hello, everyone. I'm Jose Fernandez, Vice President and Country Manager for Blue Grace Mexico. I'm leading Blue Grace's expansion efforts into Mexico to have a local presence in the country. And I'm also responsible for our cross-border product between the U.S. and Mexico. I've been in the supply chain and logistics industry for almost 20 years, and I've spent or dedicated most of my career to the cross-border sector. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today, and aprovecho para todos aquellos que están en México, darle la bienvenida. Muchas gracias por estar acá acompañándonos.
Thank you, Jose. So, and finally, our special guest today is Matt Silver. Matt is the CEO and co-founder of Cargado. And Matt, introduce, if you will, not only yourself, but talk to us a little bit about Cargado's marketplace and where you found the need for that in the market.
Sure. So I'm Matt Silver. Like you said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cargado. I spent a decade working at Coyote, where I ultimately helped start their Mexico business with Jose. And Mark was actually my first boss back in the day at Coyote. Started a company called Forger after that. That was acquired by Arrive Logistics back in January of 2022. And now working on Cargado, which is a cross-border platform for enabling freight brokers and trucking companies to better collaborate, also known as a load board for everybody in the industry.
Great. So we really appreciate you being here today, Matt, and appreciate the impact you've made for us. And before we really get started, we always like to have a little bit of fun before we kick things off, to let the audience get to know our personalities a little bit. And I'm gonna lean into you, Mark, and see if I can embarrass you a bit. We're gonna work on our celebrity doppelgangers, and I'm gonna go ahead and assign you yours, because 7 years ago when you first walked in the door, I was 100% sure that you were at that time Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Andy Dalton. So you're welcome to talk me off of that position, but I brought some evidence to prove it.
Yeah, I get more of the Scott Farkas from A Christmas Story, but yeah, I do get the occasional, hey, it's Andy Dalton, and you're walking by random people. But yeah, so I guess I'll give you that one.
I appreciate that. So we got Mark's down, and Jose, I'm going to put you on the spot, and we're going to see if we can come up with one for you. Any ideas for yours, Jose?
I'll be completely honest. I've never been compared to like a celebrity or anything like that. So
Jose is the one and only. So I'm going to put him on the spot, and I'm going to say, audience, feel free to throw in your suggestions on that. And Matt, I can feel a bunch of good things brewing for you, my friend. So I'm going to let you give us who your celebrity doppelganger is.
I don't know whether this is more about my personal preferences or other people saying this, but I've gotten Seth Rogen in the past, although that was before he slimmed down. And actually last year, the year before, I was in Guadalajara visiting an office down there, and a couple of the employees that I was talking to said that I looked like Guillermo del Toro, which threw me off a little bit. I think it's the gray beard and the hair, but yeah.
Filmmaker. See that one?
Yeah, I've always thought he had a semblance to Fozzie the Bear if you take the glasses off and put a funny hat on him.
I love it. Well, I don't have anything that noteworthy, but I will say that about 31 years ago, when I was dating my wife, I was asked for an autograph for somebody that thought at that time that I was Garth Brooks. I do not see the resemblance at all, but I do have friends in low places, so I'll take credit for that. So listen, guys, I appreciate you indulging us. Appreciate the good, being good sports about it. Let's just jump right in. And I'm going to start with you, Matt. Cross-border shipping can be complicated, as we all know. One of our core values at Blue Grace is simplified. So talk to us about how Cargado has simplified cross-border shipping for our customers.
Yeah. So when we started building out Cargado, one of the first things we focused on was onboarding the carrier network that would ultimately support the customer base that we work with, which is freight brokers and 3PLs. And as we onboarded these trucking companies, we had them fill out the types of lanes they like to haul, the markets that they service, the border cities that they cross, all the complexity of the information that you want to understand about a trucking company, and built that into the product. So when anybody's posting freight, like the Blue Grace team is doing, that freight goes out into the market. It goes to the direct carriers that need that freight, and they can come in and bid on it. And so Mexico's a lot more complex. There's so many more parties involved in a single shipment. What I will say is, yes, we're working to simplify the coverage aspect of cross-border freight. But my advice to everybody is, domestic freight is simple. It's easy. Everybody can nail that. And it's really about scale at that point when you get to the size of a Blue Grace. When it comes to cross-border freight, there's so much complexity that you cannot just copy and paste that domestic model to a cross-border model. So there are some things that effort that can be repeated, but the just copy and paste what it works in the US to cross-border does not work that way.
Yeah, and to Matt's point, the sales process of onboarding a carrier in Mexico is just a lengthier process. So, where we're finding a lot of value is, Matt understands the way that we want to build our carriers. And that's really what, we always think of every carrier as an interaction versus a transaction, whereas a lot of time the domestic, it starts with a transaction, but the actual relationship ends up being more interactions after the transaction. Mexico is very different than that. It could take 3 to 4 months to onboard a carrier when you first start talking to them. So for us, just, having that balance of being able to still go do our carrier development the way we want to do it, but also having a group of carriers that Matt has already vetted and his team have already vetted and onboarded. They're familiar with him, and, they take his familiarity with companies like us, and it really kind of expedites the process with those select carriers. So that's where we're finding a lot of value in his product, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And Jose, I'm sure this has impacted your world quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the complexity piece that Matt was explaining. I've always explained it to people that are not familiar with cross-border that it feels or it looks as if you were moving 3 loads whenever you're moving just 1 load. You have the Mexican portion, the border portion, and the US portion. Each one of them is quite different from each other. So you really need to understand all 3 to provide a good service and to understand all the layers of complexity that go along with it.
Yeah. And Jose, you and I hosted one of these back in May where we first started talking about cross-border, and we were really just kicking it off, and you were getting our Mexico office started. We talked about the challenges. We talked about the solutions. And Matt, thank you for being here with one of those solutions today. But I want to talk about some of the growth that you've seen with nearshoring and your thoughts and any new challenges that we might be facing in the future.
Yeah, of course. Well, we've definitely seen the nearshoring effect take place in 2024. I mean, just to provide everyone with some context, between January and September of this year, the trade market between the US and Mexico has grown by $33 billion already. That represents a 5.5% growth rate when compared to the same time period in 2023. And at the same time, Mexico has become the US top trade partner in the entire world. Mexico, in that same time period, represents almost 16% of the total US foreign trade market. I mean, those are very significant numbers right there. And those trends are only expected to continue in the years to come. I mean, whenever we discuss cross-border opportunities with different customers, most of them have shared with us either their intent to expand their footprint in Mexico or incorporate Mexico to their supply chain if they haven't already. That obviously gives us a very optimistic and good prospect of what the market could look like in the next few years. And then in terms of challenges, I think that a big challenge, or one of the main challenges that we could have, is just to keep track of everyone involved in the nearshoring supply chain to be able to keep up with demand, basically. By that I mean if facilities are going to be built fast enough, if roads are going to be built fast enough, if asset-based companies are going to continue to invest to increase the size of their fleets, if Mexico as a country can prepare enough candidates, enough people for all the new jobs that are going to be created thanks to nearshoring. So, but overall, I think we're in good shape. I mean, I think it's a very unique and large opportunity for a lot of investors and companies to be interested in it. I think that most of them are going to act fast enough so that they can capture as much of that opportunity as they can. So I think it's a good problem to have, but also at the same time, something to keep track of.
Yeah, growth is always a good problem, right? And Jose, I can't tell you how excited I've been to watch what you and your team have done since we opened the office in Guadalajara. And you mentioned the infrastructure and some of these pieces that are being built up to keep up with the nearshoring. Are you optimistic that that's happening? Are we able to build out structures, roads, things that we need in a pace that you feel positive about?
I think so, yeah. I'm very optimistic. Again, not only local Mexican investors, but there's also investors for many other regions in the world looking at what the opportunity is going to be like in Mexico. So I think that there's going to be plenty of companies and investors interested so that there's enough action and at a good pace so that we keep track of everything that is going on.
Yeah. And Matt, I'm sure that's enough to keep you busy and keep growing out your capacity, right?
Yep. And it's funny because I've talked to a lot of trucking companies, large and small, and anytime I come across a trucking company that's got the infrastructure to move Mexico freight, but is not doing it yet, so like decently sized fleet, maybe they've got somewhere between 100 and 300 trucks and 2 or 3 times the number of trailers, the first thing I say to them is, what do I have to do to get you to expand into Mexico? Because as this demand starts to increase, you have 2 options. Either more trucks enter the market or more trailers specifically that cross into Mexico become part of the market, or you shift more freight to transloading, meaning you unload it at the border, you truly set that up into those 3 separate shipments that Jose was talking about, and then you're procuring capacity separately too. And so that's where you're encouraging shippers that have palletized freight to be open to transload. But ultimately, the market, it'll take time to catch up, and it's good for everybody involved. Because it's going to continue to drive rates in the right direction and increase volume. But it would be great to see more carriers expand into Mexico. And the other thing I'll remind everybody is we're just starting to hear about a lot of this investment in Mexico. But that investment starts now, which means that they cut a ribbon, they start digging. It takes a few years to actually build those plants. And so we're starting to feel that heat right now. We're seeing volume increase, but fast forward 2, 3, 4 years from now, and I think it's going to be an even larger story.
Yeah, Matt, it sounds like your role is not just building out the technology for it. You're having to coax a lot of new capacity into existence there. So keep that up. I'm sure.
I love helping the industry move in the right direction. And so if we can help with capacity, whether it's through our technology or through me convincing somebody at a large refrigerated trucking company that's never touched Mexico to start servicing Mexico, I'll make that effort, and I'll even connect them with the carriers in Mexico to set up their network.
Love it. And Mark, as our chief capacity officer, I know that we're talking mostly about the cross-border freight nearshoring today, but have you seen in the U.S. domestic volumes adjust or change kind of relative to this, or do you think that's just more in line with just the general economy here in the U.S.?
Well, I guess technically when you're talking about the freight economy in general here, we're still what you would consider a freight recession, right? And I think when you look at nearshoring, it's sort of detached from that a little bit because, a chunk of that nearshoring is really shifting shipments that would potentially enter a port city. And now those shipments are, being manufactured or coming through Mexico and then, crossing at a cross-border city. So I think when you look at the growth in nearshoring, there's part of the economy that it kind of generates that, but there is some of just a global shift to bringing more, that's what the concept of nearshoring is. So I think when you're looking at it that way, it's really kind of just shifting volumes potentially away from the U.S. port cities to the cross-border cities in Mexico, in U.S.
Yeah, it's interesting. A few years ago, when there was so much activity coming into the ports, I remember looking at some of those maps of the port areas that looked like the old battleship games with not a lot of ships being taken off of it. But it is nice to see a balance. It's nice to see that there's other ways to get products in the hands of the consumer. So I think this is exciting for the market, exciting obviously for all of us. The next question is, I want a little bit of feedback from all of you on, if you can. All of us recall back in 2018 when the ELD mandate passed, that was kind of a substantial thing that made adjustments to capacity and made adjustments to the behavior that carriers had to have and we had to have with them. Talk to us about some of the things that you might see on the horizon in terms of legislation or rules. And I want to start with the cross-border focus. So if you will, Jose, we're going to start with you, and then Matt, I want you to kind of pick it up from there. And Mark, I want to take it home with you with just general regulations after we finish that. So Jose, to you first.
Sounds good. I mean, as we all know, both the U.S. and Mexico are transitioning into new administrations. There's already some rumors floating around that there may be some tariffs that could be imposed to any import that could come from Mexico to the U.S. Some experts think that those tariffs could take place or could be imposed. Some other experts think that it's more of a tactic to have the trade agreement between North America to be reviewed and renegotiated sooner rather than later. But either way, I mean, here at Blue Grace, our job is to be prepared and to make sure that we keep moving freight successfully across the borderline. And I mean, we're always working on solutions that could simplify our customers' operations as much as possible, and also try to control the cost by having much better visibility at capacity overall.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, Jose. It's our responsibility, no matter which of these things happen, to make sure that we have systems in place to keep things moving. And Matt, I'm leaning into you a little bit for that too. Are there things that have your attention now, and whether it's legislation or future legislation or new challenges and obstacles that we have in front of us?
Sure. So I think before I talk about the political aspect of it, if you actually rewind a year ago, I bet, Jose, you were stressing out or hearing about a lot of questions from customers asking about the Complemento Carta Porte that was supposed to be rolled out at the beginning of the year, which I think was implemented. And that was the biggest shift that I think this industry, specifically for cross-border freight, saw in a long time. I remember hearing from a ton of different people asking me to explain it. It's the point where I did the research and then wrote something about it. But that implementation, which was enacted by Mexico's, effectively their version of the IRS, the SCT, that wanted to be able to make sure they're collecting appropriate taxes on every single thing that should be taxed. And so that actually had an impact downstream, because the logistics companies supporting it, like Jose's team, had to help enact or enable some of that and help get the information from the carrier, bring it back to the customer, or share the structure that every customer kind of had their own version of a Carta Porte structure that they wanted. And so that would be the closest thing I would think of to like the ELD mandate that changed how people operate on a daily basis. If you think about tariffs, like let's say, for example, which is not going to happen, tariffs were placed on automotive parts coming out of Mexico. Those automotive parts would still be coming out of the same facilities in Monterrey and SLP, Querétaro, Aguascalientes, all those different locations would still be shipping the same parts. It would be more expensive for the automotive manufacturers in the US to get those parts into the US or to buy them and pay for them, but the cost of transportation would probably stay the same. And so the biggest concern that I think everybody's got related to the threat of tariffs is, one, if there were tariffs on Mexico, that would reduce manufacturing, which would drive down volume, which everyone's anticipating to grow, which is better for the market, better for the freight market, better for the freight industry. And so what I've seen and what I remember from last time Trump was in office was there's a lot of communication externally that ultimately drove negotiations and resulted in NAFTA becoming the USMCA. We're up for that to be renegotiated again, which Christopher Landau, who Trump just named as the Deputy Secretary of State under Marco Rubio for the new administration, Landau was the one that negotiated the USMCA last time. And he's very much pro-Mexico and was the ambassador to Mexico last time under Trump. And so yes, there's this back and forth about whether we're going to place tariffs on Mexico. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that's going to be a way to update the USMCA and continue moving more manufacturing away from overseas and to North America. And so, do I think tariffs with China are going to happen? Absolutely. Is the CHIPS Act something that's already been doing that? Definitely. So there's going to be more and more trade that moves from Asia and from China specifically. That manufacturing is coming to Mexico. It's not going to land in the United States. And so that just means more opportunity for this team to keep growing, keep building the business, and more demand for everybody.
Yeah, great points, Matt and Mark. I know that your eye is not just on the ball for the cross-border legislation, things that could affect there, but it's on the domestic as well. So since we have you today, let's dig a little bit into that part too, and see if there's anything outside of that you are concerned about.
I'm not sure if it's a concern, but I think we really need to monitor the FMCSA's clearinghouse, the phase 2 that just rolled out in November. So I think it was like November 18th or something like that. So for those of you that aren't familiar with that, it's a more comprehensive monitoring of drug and alcohol violations within the driver community. And the potential impact could be anywhere between the range on the low side, about 130,000 drivers to 180,000. And that 180,000 number is the number that they actually pulled out for drivers that were immediately put in this, what they're calling a prohibited status. And that's just something additional that a driver has to do in order to get out of prohibited status. So there's a lot more things that they actually have to do to get their CDLs back, to actually qualify to drive CMV, that they, currently don't have in place right now. So, at a point in time where most of us are projecting somewhere in end of Q1, Q2, that potential could be for us to get out of this freight recession and for volumes to start to normalize. If that capacity just literally was gone, you're looking at, that is a potential, on the high end to be, the total number of drivers that drive for like the top 100 US based companies. Right. And so you look at that, could be a massive impact, but I would assume that some of the drivers have already begun the process and all that, but since it's so new, you just really haven't heard much of kind of the extent of what actually happened and where some of these drivers that potentially are in that prohibited status, where they are and actually regaining, the status to drive. So I think that's one that we potentially are just going to watch because, even though that's more of a domestic thing, there is a domestic leg to, the vast majority of these cross-border shipments, if not all of them. So that's one that we're watching here.
That's a great point, Mark. You said it to me, I think, when we were first discussing what today's topics were going to be, that the driver shortage is not a new thing, right? That's something that we've used those terms for a while now.
It's 1998 they've been talking about a driver shortage. So, if they've been talking about some for that long, some of it has to be propaganda, but this one could be potentially something that's real. But yeah, when it's really, when it's very attractive to drive a truck, you see that there's really, it's not that hard to find someone to put behind the wheel. When it's not, then, some of these drivers start to exit, but this one's more of a kind of, hey, these, they're automatically put in the status where they just can't operate a vehicle. So I think that's why we're really kind of putting focus on that one.
No, that's perfect. And I know today's about cross-border, but listen, people that have freight moving cross-border have freight domestically, and these are all things we have to pay attention to. And I'm guessing, Mark, some of those drivers are part of both of those scenarios, both the cross-border and the domestic.
Sure.
Yeah. So listen, this next one, Jose, is for you. I've been so excited watching the growth in our facility in Guadalajara and the good things that you've done with your team down there. How much has the communication improved with our shipping partners and carrier partners on the Mexico side of the cross-border shipments since you've opened the office there?
Oh, great question. Having an office in Guadalajara, Mexico, has significantly helped us improve our communication with everyone we work with on the Mexico side, customers, shippers, carriers. We have a fully bilingual team that can not only speak to any of these parties in their own language, but they also understand the Mexico culture. They also understand all the idiosyncrasies that go along with it. So everyone we work with, they feel much more comfortable speaking with someone that can fully understand them. So We have a really strong and experienced team that understand cross-border really well. They've worked on the sector for many years. So they're more than capable of assisting all of our customers with any cross-border needs. So very happy to have that local presence in Mexico now.
Yeah, it's made a world of difference, Jose, and I'm very excited about what you've done with the teams there. And Matt, talk to us about how Cargado has kind of streamlined some of our communication to make that even better.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the capacity piece of it right now. So traditionally, I think most people, when they're looking for a trucking company to haul cross-border load, they're going to WhatsApp or LinkedIn. So the most common ways of communication that I've seen so far is WhatsApp groups where you've got trucking companies and freight brokers all day long messaging back and forth saying, who can help me with a load out of Veracruz going to Colorado? And nobody wants that load. And but they'll pay well, so maybe they will pick it up. But there's that, and then people are posting on LinkedIn saying that they need help. And so I'll go back to that topic I mentioned earlier about the fact that we've onboarded this carrier network that has their entire network and their presence in our system already. And so rather than Jose's team having to go call 150 different carriers every single day just to find out if they can haul a certain load, the system just pushes it out to the right carrier base. And the more freight that moves into this marketplace, it's network effects, right? The more brokers that are involved, the more freight, the more carriers that are involved, the more freight that's being posted, the more these trucking companies bid, the more data that pipes into the system, and the better decisions that Jose's team can make around which carriers to book, how much the right rate is to actually spend on a load, how much to quote a customer. So we're seeing that data turn into tangible, tools that the team can use to do their job. And my goal is ultimately, I'm not going to put WhatsApp out of business because Meta owns them, but my goal is to get people out of WhatsApp as much as possible and into Cargado and into an integrated experience that works with, your TMS and all the other parties involved.
That's great, man. We're all for it. So I don't think you put them out of business either, but let's make a little dent and get people doing the right things on their communication. And Mark, we talked about Matt. We kind of joked about him coaxing some of the capacity into the cross-border moves. With all of the new cross-border transportation, the nearshoring, all the things that are so important to being able to improve delivery and getting product a little closer to home, with some of that capacity moving in there, has that affected what you see in domestic capacity, or do you kind of see it as its own unique thing?
Well, it's definitely shifted some of the patterns in what the traditional volumes of where certain things pick up and deliver. So, traditionally when you look at markets within the United States, like the Chicagos and the Memphises of the world being like the industrial based, cities, and then you have kind of like the user consumer cities, you have that usually imbalance, right? So there's more freight shipping from those industrial areas to support, some of these user-based consumption, cities. And that's no different with now Mexico. Mexico's becoming, an industrial type of, it's a country, but you're looking at it, it's more than just that. It's now you're looking at this as an industrialized city, and there's already an imbalance. So you have that, there's more freight going northbound from Mexico into the U.S. And as Matt and Jose have already stated, with all these potential investments that are happening, that imbalance can potentially just continue to increase. So if we don't figure out a way to pump more volumes the other direction, then you're going to see that imbalance of capacity even continue to expand. So I think you're looking at that in that way, and you're seeing even some of the retail shifts. So, maybe the retail seasons out west aren't as pronounced now because some of that capacity or some of that volume is now shipping out of Mexico instead. So you're watching definitely a pattern shifting of where traditional lanes typically will ship from. And now you're seeing a more pronounced volumes coming, out of Mexico and, even into Mexico for a certain extent, but there's definitely that potential imbalance that could continue to grow with all the investment that's going on down there.
And Mark, I think that the audience has had an opportunity to learn some things today. I know, and I can see from some of the comments, Clark, thank you, some of the others on there. It looks like you guys have got some folks that you worked with before that have learned a little bit about the industry from you, and we thank you for being here to listen today. If there's any questions that any of you have on LinkedIn today, we may not stop and address all those now, but put those in the chat. We'll make sure that one of the experts on the screen, one of the guys that are a lot smarter than me, gets back with you and gets you all the answers that you need. But I wanted to kind of wrap things up today by first thanking everyone for listening in and giving us your time. And thank you so much, Jose, Mark, and Matt, especially for being our special guests today. But before we leave, I want to see if we can just kind of give everybody either one nice takeaway or one good next step. And Matt, we're going to save you for last as you're our special guest. And Mark, I'm going to kick off with you, and then we'll get to Jose for the cross-border side of it.
Sure. Obviously, you can tell just by having this conversation that it's the cross-border transportation in and of itself is just a different animal, right? And so before you dive head first, just make sure that you have a plan. And hopefully this session's been educational. And at the same time, maybe it's an escalator to have an additional conversation with Cargado or Blue Grace to help you out in some of that, because we are, experts in that. We've made major investments, both of us have, and we continue to do so. So appreciate everyone that jumped on, and, we're always open to continuing to have conversations offline. So let us know.
Thank you, Mark. And Jose, what a great team you've built, and I'm so excited for the future, but give the audience a little something to take away as the next step.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I would recommend everyone that's listening or that's interested in learning more about cross-border, well, to establish strong relationships with people that have the right experience, that understand the sector and that have been there before, so that they can help answer any questions or lay out any different possibilities that they could have within their own supply chain. Here at Blue Grace, we build a very strong network that includes not only carriers, but also customs brokers, other border services providers. We also pair that up with some of the best technology. And we're always trying to streamline our processes to find ways to either help customers reduce costs or reduce transit times, or have more options and different ways of working around the different circumstances that come with cross-border. So please feel free to reach out.
Jose and Matt, we'll let you close out that part of it and talk to us about good next steps in your world and things that in general you think folks should pay attention to.
Yeah. So my advice, I'm going to give it to 3 different groups of people, since I imagine there's a mix of people watching this. So from the shipper perspective, when you're thinking about who to work with, you want to be working with a partner that actually understands the business, to Jose's point, and has the network. And so that's one side of it, is making sure the companies that you're working with, the partners that you've got, whether they're brokers, customs brokers, freight forwarders, they need to actually understand the business. So that's one piece. 2, if you're on the logistics side and you're looking to actually get into cross-border freight, our product is a great starting point for it. If you want to become a leader in the industry, you need someone like Jose running that function for you, scaling it, because there are so many things that go on at the border, that problems that can come up, that if you don't have those relationships with those customs brokers, if you don't understand how to untangle a mess that could happen at the border, you need to be able to nail that. And if you're a trucking company that wants to expand into Mexico, I can't say it enough. Get into Cargado, reach out to me. I will help you with it. It's free for carriers. So there's no pitch here. But we want to help increase and improve the collaboration in this market and in this industry. And so the more we can invest in the technology and partner with everybody, the happier I think everybody will be in their jobs.
Very well said, Matt. And we very much appreciate you being here as our guest today. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, audience. Remember, freight changes. Things are different. Modes are different. Where we put freight and position it, where we finally take it to our final end users changes. We want to make sure that we're able to be flexible and be ready when that does happen. So you got a team that can help you with that. Please reach out to any of us for any help that you need. We'll see you next time, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias a todos en México. Saludos.